What's up, guys? Welcome to Demo with Mo. I'm your host, Monique Simmons. We'll be discussing dating, engaged, and married objectives from a young Christian's perspective. Are you guys ready? Let's dive in. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Monique, the host of Demo with Mo. Thank you for tuning in into a new episode. Today, we will be discussing in-law relationships. This can be any relative or family member of your spouses. A lot of people, when they hear in-laws, they automatically assume the parents, father-in-law, mother-in-law, but that dynamic stretches way further than that. This could be siblings, this could be grandparents, this could be aunts, uncles, cousins. Any relative or family member of your spouses is your in-law. So this is kind of what we'll be talking about on today. I'm excited. I hope you guys are as well. This topic is very sensitive to some. I understand. I can relate personally. I feel you. And for some, this topic is no issue. They have a great relationship with their in-laws. There's no issues. They haven't had any problems. Kudos to you. That is amazing. And I love it. And I just hope you would encourage and help others in your life who may be struggling in this area. But those of you who may not be as close to your in-laws, maybe you've had some bumps in the road, you've ran across some issues, whatever that may be, this episode is for all you guys, wherever you may be in your journey. Follow me on social media, Facebook at Demo with Mo. Check out my website at demowithmo.com where you can leave reviews. You can catch up on old episodes. And wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to go leave us a 5-star rating. When you leave a rating, it not only helps me, but it helps others to find the podcast. The more ratings you have, the more your podcast is put out there for others to be able to find it. So wherever you are now, whether it's Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, we are there. Go leave us a rating. All right, guys, let's dive into today's episode. Hey guys, today we are discussing in-law relationships. I personally think this is something that needs to be talked about more. It needs to be talked about in marriages, especially before you get married. When you guys do premarital counseling or before you say I do, this is a conversation that you definitely need to have. This is a common issue for a lot of marriages where you guys are coming together as one. Genesis 2:24 says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." It is so funny to me that God said this because at the time, it was just Adam and Eve. And a lot of people may say, this is Old Testament. He was talking to Adam and Eve. But I want you guys to remember something. Adam and Eve were the first people. They were the first parents. They had no parents. They didn't have a father and mother that Adam had to leave and cleave to his wife. But God was setting this in place for the order of how marriage should be. God already knew the things that were to come and how this could be an issue for a lot of people. So he gave us instructions on how marriage should be handled. Back to the point of this is something that definitely needs to be discussed because a lot of people go into marriages and they don't understand. A lot of times people think we'll just continue to do things the way we've always done them, whether it be the son or the daughter. Maybe we'll do things the way we've always done them. I left my family and yes, I'm joining to my partner, my spouse, and we're supposed to become one. But a lot of people go into the marriage thinking things will just be a continuation of the way they've always been. But no, when you become married, this is now your nuclear family. It's you and your spouse, and when you guys or if you guys have children, that is your nuclear family. Everyone else outside of that becomes your extended family. That can be your mom, your dad, your sisters, your brothers, your cousins, your aunts, your favorite grandmother. Yes, you love your grandmother, but even your grandmother is extended family. Now your priority is your spouse and your children if you have them. You are not joining one another's family. A lot of us think that. A lot of us thought that, if you don't think it anymore. A lot of people think now our families, you hear it at weddings all the time. People are saying that their families are now joining together and you're one big family. But that's not what it is. When you get married, you are now creating your own family. And that's the way God put it in place. So before you guys get married, have this conversation. And if you're already married, it's not too late. Don't turn the podcast episode off. Don't tune me out. Don't think that you've missed the mark and it's too late. We've been married for years. We never had this conversation. It's always been an issue. This is just the way it's going to have to be forever. No, that's a lie. And I'll tell you that from experience. The beginning years of my husband and I's marriage, we struggled so much in this area. It was so hard. And if I'm perfectly honest and transparent with you, there were times in the beginning of our marriage where I thought I would walk away because of the issues that we dealt with our in-laws. And it's just because we were young when we got married. My husband and I were both 20. We didn't really know a healthy dynamic of what marriage should look like. My parents separated when I was in high school. And if you have not already, go back and check out the episode that my mom and I did. I interviewed her on last year, back in November, and we discussed this very topic. I asked her what was her hardest issue or the thing that she struggled with the most in her marriage, and she said in-laws. And to be honest with you, before I talked to her on that podcast episode, I had no idea. I know that she had issues with them, but I didn't know that it caused such a strain on her marriage. And if you have not, go check out that episode. But we didn't have healthy dynamics of what marriage and boundaries, which we'll get more into about boundaries, but neither one of us had a healthy example of that. So we struggled with that for a long time, for years, you guys, for years. And I'm encouraging you because our dynamic changed, but that changed when we made the conscious decision to change it. You have to consciously decide with your partner what you want your family to look like. A lot of times you get into marriage and you assume what you think you want it to look like, what you want it to be. Where will we spend our holidays? Who will keep the kids? Will the wife be a stay-at-home mom? Will she work? Will she do it the same way my mom did? Will the husband do it the same way his dad did? But we can't go into our marriages and assume these things because now we will have those issues. So we have to consciously sit down, have a conversation, and discuss what we want our family to be and what we want it to look like. Honestly, this can be and is a very difficult transition for a lot of families. I told you guys, my husband and I got married when we were 20. We were babies. We were young. We didn't really know how to be adults. We really hadn't figured that thing out yet. We had just graduated from high school just a couple years before. So it was a lot of things we had no idea about. So it was such a hard transition because we both left our parents' home straight into living together. So we had never lived on our own. We had really never had the conversation about setting boundaries. There was no discussion up front. We just went into this thing and thought we would figure it out as we went. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, that caused us a lot of heartache and pain. For example, I was a daddy's girl all my life until I got married to my husband. I was a daddy's girl all my life. I called my daddy for everything. I had a flat tire. I needed gas. Engine light came on. Whatever it was, I called my dad for everything. That was the norm for me. I had a very close relationship with my dad, and my mom and I wasn't as close. So I depended on my dad for a lot of things. So when I got married to my husband, if my oil needed to be changed or I was upset with my husband, we had an issue or whatever it was that came up, I went back to what I always did, what was normal for me, what I was used to. I would just call my dad. And honestly, I never thought a second about it. Like I never gave my husband a chance to do things himself. I just assumed he couldn't do it, or if he told me he couldn't do it, all right, let me call my daddy. But that was such a disrespect to my husband. But I didn't know that. I had no idea. We just going along trying to figure it out. And you know what my dad did? My dad checked me. And I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to in-law relationships, my dad did it. He did it very well. I would call my dad, and if there was an issue with my husband and I, and tell him, and this is just in the beginning of our marriage. I definitely don't do any of this that I'm telling you anymore. So that's why my encouragement to you is the dynamic can change. Doesn't have to stay the same way. So my dad started getting on me in a very kind, loving way, this is your husband now. You are his responsibility now. Whatever, he wouldn't ask no questions. You know how you have some parents, they want to get all in your business. They want to know what happened, what they say, what they do. Not my father. You and your husband's business is you guys' business. You and your husband have to figure this out. You guys are married to one another. You've committed to one another. You're going to have to work through your issues. He never once said anything negative about my husband. I hear so much about one partner's parents talking negative about their child's spouse. And that can be either side, husband or wife. My dad never once said anything negative about my husband. My husband and I have been married almost 12 years. My dad has never once said anything negative to my husband or even about my husband. And he set the example for me. He really did. And Dad, if you're listening to this, thank you. I appreciate you for showing that and setting that example for me, because I didn't know. Like I told you guys, we were trying to figure this thing out. Fast forward, never had any more issues with that. I stopped calling my dad. I started figuring things out. Now, on the flip side of that, I told you guys we were babies when we got married. My husband was my mom-in-law's only son in the house. He has a brother, but he's much older. So he was her baby boy, leaving the nest and going to be with this woman. So you can just imagine how she felt. And now that I have a son myself, especially now that he's older, I know I don't have that many years left with him being in my home. I know that he's going to have to go out there and spread his wings and one day get married and build a family of his own. And that's a whole nother conversation, because I myself have to be prepared, because one day I will be someone's mother-in-law. And from my own experience, I try to remember the way that I wanted to be treated, the way I wanted to feel in that relationship and in that dynamic. And I need to make sure that I do the same for my future son-in-law or daughter-in-law if my children decide to get married one day and build their own families, which I pray and I hope that they do. So yes, my husband and I get married. And before we got married, we lived together, which if you've listened to my podcast over time, you know our story. You know that we were living together and not married and went through hell and gave our lives to Christ and got stuff in order. Go back and check out those podcast episodes. But fast forward, we get married. We're young. We have this son. Then we're getting ready to have our daughter. And it was just a hard transition for us. We had a lot of issues where sometimes unwanted advice was given, or it felt like we were trying to be controlled or told what to do. And I'm going to be honest with you, I struggled with that for a long time. I really, really did. But as a parent, I understand how hard it is to let go of your child. You've always done everything for this child, and this could be son or daughter. You've always done everything for this child, and now they out there and they have to do it on their own and figure it out on their own. And it's kind of hard to let go. It's kind of hard, and that's a hard transition to be a parent of a child and have that parent-child dynamic to now transition into having a parent-adult-child relationship. It's just a hard transition for a lot of people. And when it's a hard transition for the parents, it makes it a hard transition for the couple that has gotten married. Because now what God says is supposed to be leaving your father and mother and cleaving to your wife and the two of you becoming one. Now it's hard to live that out because it doesn't seem like it has been leaving and cleaving. But we'll get more into that. In your marriage, maybe one or both of you came from toxic families, but you were raised this way and don't recognize it as toxic. This can be an even harder transition. If you were raised in a family that did things a certain way that per se were not healthy, you really don't recognize that because that's the way you've lived all your life until you transition and have your own family. And then you begin to recognize that maybe some things that I learned were not healthy. Maybe some things that I was taught, maybe the way that I was raised was not so healthy. That can make that transition even harder. Bustle.com says signs your parents or in-laws are toxic. Because like I said, this in-law dynamic is not one way or the other. It could be the husband's family. It can be the wife's family. It could be both of you guys got families together. Signs that they are toxic. One, they ignore your boundaries. You put things in place. You say you want to do it this way. You want to do it that way, and they completely ignore it. You say you don't want your children to have soda, but when your kids visit them, they say, I'm the grandparents or I'm the uncle or the aunt, and if I want them to have soda, I'll give them soda. That's ignoring boundaries. If you as the parent have put this thing in place, you have to respect them as the parent and do what they say. 2, controlling. They want to control everything in your life, every decision you make, where you put your kids in daycare, when and where you buy your first home, where you spend your holidays, who you spend your holidays with. They want to control everything. 3, gaslighters. They do things to you. They say things to you, and then they play the victim. They act like this never happened. What are you talking about? I never said that to you. I would never. Gaslighters. 4, manipulators. They try to manipulate you to do and get the outcome that they want. 5, over-reliant. Maybe they've depended on your partner for everything. Even before you guys got married, maybe your partner did everything for them. You know, maybe paid bills or helped around the house or ran errands or whatever it was that they did. Now they've become over-reliant. They depend on your partner for everything. 6, they're critics. They criticize everything you do. You're a terrible father. Why do you let them eat that kind of food? Why do you let them hang out with so-and-so? Why did you buy that house in that neighborhood? Why do you wear your clothes like that? Why do you go to that church? They find a reason to criticize everything that you do. Okay, so we've discussed the toxic or negative traits of in-laws. Now we're going to discuss the positive traits of in-laws because a lot of people have good relationships with their in-laws. And this can be your dynamic as well. This thing can be changed. The dynamic can be changed. It does not have to stay the same way. Positive traits. SaneBites.com says they're welcoming. They welcome you into the family. Even before you guys get married, they welcome you in. They let you know that they accept you and you are a part of their family. And they love on you. They just make you feel a part of and not excluded. 2, they're supportive of you. Like I said, this could be either side, husband or wife. They support you. They support your decisions in life. They support your career choices. They support all of the things that you do because they love you. 3, they have an open line of communication. They're not afraid to talk to you if maybe you rub them the wrong way, because I want to say this. It's not always the parents or the siblings or the grandparents or whoever your partner's relative is Sometimes it can be you. Sometimes you go in already with this negative thought, maybe from some things your spouse has said in the past, maybe something your spouse said about their upbringing, maybe some things you thought you saw, but it's not always them. This could go either way, but they have an open line of communication. If maybe you said something that rubbed them the wrong way, they're not afraid to come straight to you. They're not going to call their best friend and talk about you. They're not going to call other members in the family and try to pull them on their side to not like you or feel some type of way about you, but they're going to have an open line of communication to you. Either they reach out to their child or they reach out to you, but they want to make sure that everything is okay. And that open line of communication has to go both ways. You, as the partner of their child, you have to have this open line of communication as well. 4, they're collaborative and not competitive. You see this a lot. Usually the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law dynamic, this is just a common thing. You see it all the time, even like in the movies that's portrayed. You see this dynamic a lot because the mom has raised their son their whole life. They've always been the one to do everything for them, to support them, to encourage them, especially if you had a great mom. They've always done all these things for you. And now this woman is now coming in that you fell in love with, that you've committed your life to. And now it's you guys together. It's you. Now your wife is the head of you guys' home. And I don't mean that in the sense of the man is the head of the home. God set it in order that way. God, then husband, then wife, then children. But what I mean when I say the wife is the head of the home, meaning she's the one who takes care of business. She makes the plans. Maybe she does the calendars, but she runs her home. That's what she does. She's the homemaker. She takes care of the home. She makes sure things are in order in the home. So now she does all these things that once the mom did. Because I just imagine my son, I do everything for him. I support him. I make sure he has everything he needs, make sure he has all his appointments, make sure he's everywhere he needs to be on time. I get that dynamic. So now when he falls in love one day, I hope he finds this beautiful woman who loves him and supports him and encourages him. All the things that I have given to him over the years. I really hope that one day my son finds that in another young woman. But I know that will be a hard transition. That will be the switch just doesn't switch off like that. I'm not going to now not feel like I need to encourage him and support him and love him and all of those things. I just have to realize that their dynamic is changing. Their relationship, the way it once was, it won't be that same way anymore, but I can still love him and I can still support him and I can still encourage him. It just won't look the same way. But we'll discuss that a little more further as well. But it's easy to get in that competitive mode. I need to one up my son's wife, or I need to one up my daughter's husband. I used to do it like this, and now they're kind of trying to come in and do things. So now it can become competitive when it really should be collaborative. How can we come together? If we know that Christmas is our thing, we all love Christmas, all sides of the family, my parents, my husband's parents, me, my husband, my children, we all love Christmas. That's our thing. It doesn't now have to become a competitive thing. We can collab on this thing. How can we all make this a success by coming together, working together, figuring it out together? Positive trait, collaborative and not competitive. 5, respectful. You respect your child's spouse. You don't always have to agree with them, but you respect them because now they have their own relationship. They have their own home. They are adults and they get to make the choices for their lives. And you don't have to agree with everything that they do, but you do have to respect them as adults. If you think it's a mistake, if you think it's a bad decision, that's something that they have to deal with, but you have to respect them. 6, they graciously accept that the relationship dynamic has changed. And this is what I was getting at when we had the other point about being collaborative and not competitive. Because even though we don't have the same relationship as parent and child that we had growing up before you left home and got married and had your own family, we still can have a great relationship. Now, instead of me trying to make all of the decisions for you, I support you in the decisions that you made. Instead of me trying to control the things that go on in your life, I encourage you to go out and do what you think is best for your family. The dynamic just changes. When God tells us, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall be one flesh, that don't mean forget mom and daddy. That don't mean not talk to mom and dad. That doesn't mean to cut them out of your lives. That means now your wife, and if you guys have children, that is now your priority. Because before, when you were in the home, you took care of the home. You made sure mom and dad were good. You did things around the house. Whatever was needed, you did it. But now you leaving home, and that home, your parents' home, is not your priority anymore. Now your spouse, your wife, and your children, that is your priority now. Our relationship is not over with our parents. Our relationship has just changed. And for a lot of people, that is hard to accept. You just kind of have to work that thing out and get into a new groove. And I'm going to be honest, personally, my relationship with my mom now as an adult married woman with children is so much better than it was when I was growing up, because I had a smart mouth. I was rebellious. There were a lot of things which hopefully one day you'll get to hear that discussed more with another interview in the future with my mom about all of the things that transitioned in our life and all of the things that we went through and how we had to work through forgiveness and restoration in our relationship. One day you guys will get to hear that. But we had to figure that thing out, and we have a much better relationship now as adults than we did growing up. So the relationship is not over. It's just a different relationship. It's a new dynamic. You just figuring it, you figure out what works for you guys and do that. But it's not over. It has just changed. It's just different. 7, don't force your traditions. If you are an in-law, and if you're listening to this, or if one day you'll soon be an in-law, or if you're just trying to prepare for this, because like I told you, my son is a teenager now. I know it's not going to be that many years where he will still be in my home. He's going to be, even before he gets married, he's going to be an adult. And he's going to have to make his own traditions and do what's best for his life. He may not like the way I did things, but he had to do them because he was a child in my home. Maybe he doesn't want to open Christmas gifts on Christmas Eve. You know, we have a tradition where my children, well, everyone opens one gift on Christmas Eve. When he becomes an adult, he may not want to do that. On Thanksgiving, you guys may sit down as a family and have a traditional meal. Well, when your child grows up, they may not want that. They may want to go on vacation for Thanksgiving. And we have to be, as parents, and I'm saying we because I am a parent, we have to be okay with that. We cannot force our traditions on our children. And this is an area that I struggle with too. And I think a lot of people in marriages struggle with this because the husband and wife, both come from completely different families. The dynamics are different. Some people come from single parent homes. Some people come from where the parents were married. You know, they had the traditional, what you call a traditional home, where they grew up with their mom and their dad in the same household. Some people grew up with a small family where they were very close knit. Some people grew up with families where they had families all over in different states, and they really didn't get together that much. We all come from different dynamics and backgrounds. So when we go into marriages, we have to have this conversation of how we want to spend our holidays, what we want our traditions to be. You have to make new traditions for your family, your nuclear family, husband, wife, and children, if you have them. You don't go into your marriage and assume, because it's going to be a hot mess, y'all, and I'm telling y'all this from experience. If you both go into your marriage and you assume, the husband assumes we're going to do it the same way we did it in my family growing up, and the wife assumes we're going to do it the way we did it in our family, that won't work. That will not work, you guys. You and your spouse have to sit down and have a conversation. What do you want your traditions to be? What do you want your holidays to look like? What do you want vacations to look like? Will we all vacation together, all families together, or will it just be our nuclear family, husband, wife, and children? What do we want the dynamic to be? Don't force your traditions. You guys, for years, I told you guys, for those first years of my husband and I's marriage, this area was so hard for me. And you guys, if you've been listening to my podcast anytime, you know that I'm always going to be transparent and I'm always going to be honest. And just to be clear, this is not a in-law bashing session. I would never, ever do that. I love my in-laws. They are a big part of our lives. It was a hard transition for us in the beginning. We went into this thing where we did vacations together. And I'm a big traveler. I love to travel. I get on the road in a minute. If my husband and I didn't have children, we would be gone all the time. I promise. We would be gone. We would be on the road and would be gone. But I love to vacation. And we went into marriage without having the conversations of what we wanted it to look like. For me personally, I didn't come from a family where we vacationed with all of our families together. When my family and I went out of town, it was me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. That's what it looked like. And I loved it. I loved it so much. So in my mind, I didn't know I needed to have a conversation with my husband about that. I thought we would go into our marriage and we would know that. Like, this is what we do when we vacation. It's just us. It's me, you, and them children. But that was not always the case because his family, they all vacationed together. Mom and siblings and, cousins and aunts and whomever, they whole family would kind of get together. That was not my thing. But I didn't know that. We didn't have this conversation. So we would plan vacations and some kind of way everybody would wind up going. And it was a headache. Honestly, it was a headache for me because this is not what I wanted. But the issue was I didn't voice that in the beginning. I didn't have a conversation with my husband. I'm about to tell you guys something that I did that I would not recommend you doing in your marriage. And you may already be doing it. And it makes me cringe now even thinking about it because I've just gotten out of that place. But this was me for years. And I encourage you, if this is you doing this, stop doing this because it's working against you and not for you, because your desire is to be one with your spouse. And this can be husband or wife. This is not a wife thing. I'm just telling you what I did. But your desire is to be one. You don't want to separate. You don't want to work against your spouse. You want to work together with your spouse. What I would do is whenever there was an issue with my in-laws, and it doesn't matter which in-law, it could have been anything or anybody, but whenever there was an issue, instead of me voicing how I felt or how can we work through this or what we should do, I would just nag and complain to my husband. So-and-so is always doing it. So-and-so always got something to say. So-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. I nagged my husband to death. And that did not work. The more I nagged and complained, the worse it got. Because now I have made my partner, because this is your partner. You guys are supposed to be on the same team working together. The more I did that, the more he would just shut down. Whenever I had anything to say about his family, even if it was something positive, it was like going in one ear and out the other one. Because I just want you to put yourself in their shoes right now. These are people that you grew up with your whole life. These are people that you love, And even though me as his wife, he loves me, but these are people you grew up with all your life. That's just like, imagine when you were a kid. And let's say your mom made you mad, but you went to school and somebody tried to crack a mama joke on your mom. Even though you're mad with your mom, even though you are hot with your mama, nobody is finna crack a mama joke. Them were fighting words. You better not say nothing about my mama. That's the same way it is when we get into our marriages and we try to nag our partner, and like I said, this can go both ways. Because in the beginning, my husband better not say nothing about my daddy. You better not say nothing about my daddy. But what I want to encourage you to do, because family members may be toxic, they may be negative, they may be crossing boundaries, they may not respect you, but nagging, even if you're in the right, this is not the way to go about it. What I encourage you to do, if you are a Christian, I want you to get in your word. I want you to get on your knees and begin to talk to God about it. Talk to God about it. Tell him everything that's going on, because he already knows it. You don't have to try to hide it or sugarcoat it or act like you don't feel the way you feel. I told you guys in the beginning, this was the hardest thing in my marriage for me for years. In the beginning of our marriage, it was the hardest thing for me. But the hardest thing kept me on my knees before a holy God. God began to pull some things out of me, create me. I am the woman I am today because of a lot of what I went through in the beginning of my marriage. God began to mold me and shape me out of those hard things, because, people always pray for, they want patience. I want to have strength. I want to have wisdom. But how do you get patience if you never go through something that you have to be patient for? How do you have strength if you never have to lift weights and build muscle? You know what I'm saying? How do you get wisdom if you never face something where you have to make a wise decision about? Y'all, I don't regret any of it. I really don't. I don't regret any of it, because it made me into the woman that I am today. But back to my point, I want you to get in your word. I want you to get on your knees, and I want you to talk to God about it. Pour it all out. However you're feeling. The tears, the hurt, the pain. I promise you, I empathize with you. If that's you on the other end and you're feeling that way, I get you. I get you. But I want you to not nag your partner, whether that be your husband or your wife. Don't nag them and complain to them. Go to God and talk to God about it. Once you get done talking to God about it, I then want you to go to your partner. If this has been you, where you've been this nagging and complaining, I want you to go to your partner and apologize. I want you to tell them that you're sorry, that you have talked negative about their family, whoever that family is, whether it be their father, their grandmother, their sister, their brother, whoever. I want you to apologize for nagging and complaining and criticizing and putting them down. Wherever you fit in that scenario, I want you to apologize to them. And I want you to tell them that you are ready to be on one accord, that you are not against them, but you are on board with them, that you want to be on one accord. You want to be just like Genesis 2:24 says, that you want to leave and cleave, and you guys to become one flesh. How can we do this? What do we need to discuss? What boundaries can we put in place? What is it that we need to do to work on this area together? You know what I'm saying? Now you're coming, because you've been two now, but now you're joining together to become one, the way that God wanted it to be. And I promise you, God will work on your behalf. And I'm not just saying this, people like to quote scriptures and say these things that they really have not experienced. It's what they've heard somebody else quote, or what they big mama always said. But I'm telling you from experience, when you begin to do things the way God has put them in place, the way that he says for them to be done, you will see his hand moving in your life. Real talk. Okay, next point, 8. Don't interfere with their parenting style. I know you raised your children a certain way. I know you may have raised them a certain way. This is the way it's always been done. This is the way it worked for you. They came out great. All of the things. But you don't get to interfere with your child or their spouse's parenting style. They get to raise their children the way that they want to raise their children. And all you can do is support them in that. As long as they're not causing your grandchild any harm. And I mean, there's abuse, there's neglect. That's not what I'm talking about. Because in that case, you definitely need to get involved. But I mean, they're just not raising their children the way that you raised yours or the way you think that they should be raised. Do not interfere with their parenting styles. Just support them when they ask if they need your help, if they want your help. Be willing to help, be willing to support, be willing to encourage, but don't interfere. 9, don't speak negative about their child's spouse. A positive trait of an in-law. I don't care if your son-in-law made you mad, he said something to your daughter that hurt her feelings and she may have cried. You don't get to speak negative about your child's spouse. You just can't do that. That is not your place. You know, if your child maybe says something negative, you should kind of turn them around. Because I told you, my daddy had to get me in check a whole lot of times when I would call myself trying to vent about my husband in the beginning of our marriage. And that's what you do as a parent, but don't you dare talk negative about your child's spouse. I don't care what it is. You're upset with them. They did something you didn't like. They offended you. You don't get to talk negative about them to your child. And if your child respects their marriages and upholds their spouse, they won't even allow you to talk negative about their spouse. Because don't get me wrong, I love my parents. I love my mom and my dad. But they better not dare ever say anything negative about my husband and let me hear about it, or say it to me, even though they would never. My parents have never said anything negative about my husband, but still, they know that, and they would never do that and have never done that because of me, because of the respect I have for my husband, and I'm not going to let anybody talk about him. So, last point, 10, they give advice only when asked. Goes back into the interfering with the parenting style. Maybe you don't agree with something, you don't like the way something is being done. Don't give your advice. Don't just throw out your advice out there unless they ask you. If they ask you, maybe how did you potty train, or how did you do so-and-so's hair, or how did you cook that good dressing you made for Thanksgiving? But don't come over your child's house and criticize the food. Let's say you come over for New Year's and maybe your son-in-law made some black-eyed peas and cabbage and you didn't like the black-eyed peas and cabbage. It wasn't the way you make your black-eyed peas and cabbage. Don't be throwing your advice out there if it wasn't asked. Man, you should have fried that cabbage. You should have put it in a skillet. Only give advice when asked. And when you guys build this healthy relationship, better believe your son or your daughter-in-law, they will ask you for your advice when they need it. Back to that point I made earlier about the open line of communication. But this takes work, you guys. This just doesn't happen by chance. You have to be intentional. This has to be a conscious decision between all parties to make this happen. Ways to deal with in-laws. Okay, we've talked about the toxic traits that some in-laws can have. We talked about the positive traits that some in-laws can have. Now we're going to discuss ways to deal with in-laws. First, set boundaries. Boundaries are so important, and this is not just for in-laws. This is for any relationship you have in your life. Work relationship, church relationship, your best friends, whomever, even with your children. You even have to set boundaries for yourself because you'll get out of line. Boundaries are just to keep you safe. It's just like a fence. You know how you put a fence in your yard when you have little children? Maybe when you buy your first home, you want a home with a fence already around it. And that's just to keep your children safe. You have these boundaries to keep them from getting hurt. That's the same way boundaries are. You put the boundaries in place to keep your family safe, to keep feelings from getting hurt, to keep from disagreements. Whatever that boundary look like, that's a conversation for you and your spouse. But you have to set boundaries when dealing with in-laws. Whatever that boundary could be, it could be for your child. We don't give our child certain foods. This is how we do our holidays. Thanksgiving is for us. We're not going anywhere for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, every year, Thanksgiving will be spent in our own home. And your boundary may be that Everyone is welcome into your home. Everybody can come, but we're not going anywhere for Thanksgiving. We're not going house to house. We're not house jumping. That's our boundary. Or your boundary is never talking negative about my partner. I don't care what's going on. I don't care how you feel, but you don't get to talk negative to them. Whatever your boundary looks like, you and your partner work together, because the wife can't have a boundary that the husband is not enforcing. And the husband can't have a boundary that the wife is not on board with and enforcing. You guys have to be on one accord. You have to sit down. And this is not always an easy conversation, guys. And yes, it may take some time, but it's to keep the marriage and the family safe. Sit down, have the conversation, discuss with your partner what you want your boundaries to be. And this leads into my next point. 2, enforce the boundaries. Don't let your parents, don't let your siblings, don't let your grandmama them, don't you let anybody manipulate you, talk you out of, make you feel bad for your boundaries. Nobody. You set your boundaries with your spouse. You enforce your boundaries. If this is what you say your boundary is, now if you and your partner's boundaries change, you guys are in agreement. Maybe you're in a season of life where your kids have gotten older. You can do more things that you used to then do when your kids was younger. You guys sit down and have a conversation about your boundaries changing. But if your boundaries haven't changed together, you enforce your boundaries. And I don't care who tries to come up against them. Don't you dare not enforce your boundaries. 3, communicate directly. Okay, so this is going to be a little different for some people. Communicate directly. Let's say your father-in-law offends you. You should talk to your spouse first, and 2 things can happen. Either you can let your spouse, because this is his parent, he knows how to talk to him or communicate with him. He's grew up with him his whole life. He can go directly to your father-in-law, or you guys have a conversation first. Don't just pop up on them. You guys have a conversation first. You guys be in agreement and on one accord, and then you guys go to the father-in-law directly together. But you have to be on one accord. You don't want to just go popping off at your father-in-law. You haven't talked to your husband. You haven't said anything. You haven't mentioned what happened or what was done. And you may have even taken something the wrong way. Maybe your father-in-law didn't even mean to offend you. Maybe it was taken out of context, or maybe he was just having a bad day and it had nothing to do with you. We have to be careful with our words and reacting every time someone is saying something, or every time we feel offended, or every time we feel criticized. Have a conversation with your partner. Let them know what happened. And either they can go directly to the father-in-law, or you guys go together, but communicate directly. Don't be calling your girlfriend, letting her know how your father-in-law offended you, and now you just upset and nothing happens and nothing changes. You just mad. Because these are people that you're going to have to deal with the rest of your life. As long as you and your spouses are married, these are people that you're going to have to deal with. And especially if you have children, their grandchildren, you want them to have a great relationship with them. I have great relationships with my grandparents. I couldn't even imagine my life without my grandparents. So I wouldn't ever want to mess with that dynamic. You guys going to have to work through some stuff. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. Your feelings may be hurt. There may be some tears. There may be some uncomfortable stuff. There may be some time where you guys don't talk to one another. There may be some issues that you can't resolve for a while, but you got to deal with them. We can't avoid them. We can't act like they're not there, but we got to be able to communicate directly. 4, establish your own traditions with your family. You and your spouse have to talk about, as I told you guys earlier, you have to talk about what you want your traditions to be, what you want your family dynamic to look like. You guys sit down, be in agreement about that, and now it's time to tell your family. The wife has to tell her parents, and I'm not saying just her, but you guys together, or however you want that to look. But you need to communicate with your family. She needs to communicate with her family, and the husband needs to communicate with his family about what you guys' traditions will be. My husband and I have agreed that Christmas is ours. We will not be going anywhere for Christmas. Whether that, because some years, I told y'all we like to jump on the road. So some years that may be a vacation. We may go out of town and spend Christmas. And I have no issue with it. I do not have to be at home doing a traditional Christmas at the house. So So that could look different for us, but we have agreed that Christmas Day is ours. That's for our nuclear family, my husband and I and our children. Nobody else can have that. We're not. I love my grandma, but I'm not going to my grandma's house. I give my grandma her Christmas gift usually on Christmas Eve or a few days before. I'm not going anywhere. Now, if we're home and we're not on vacation, because y'all, I really want me a Christmas vacation. But if we're spending Christmas at home, our doors are open. Our family is welcome to stop by, bring the kids gift, have breakfast, eat dinner with us. And I'm an extrovert. I love to be with family and friends. That's my thing. My husband is actually the one. He really would prefer if it would just be us. He really would prefer if I did not invite family. But, so we compromise on that. But our door is open. But Christmas, that's our tradition now. And in the beginning of our marriage, we never spoke up. We never said that. I wanted that, but never said that. In one year, I had a conversation with my husband, and I'm like, I'm tired of spending every holiday with your family. We have our own family now. We have to put our own traditions in place. We need to have something for us. I don't want to share everything. And that's how it's supposed to be, you guys. You have to make your own traditions with your own family and begin to do your own things. And one day my children will get out there and they will be in relationships or marriage and have their own families, and they're going to want to have their own traditions. And you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to pull my big girl panties up, and I'm going to have to respect them in their marriages and their families. And I'm sure that's going to be a hard transition for me. But I'm going to have to do that. So, next, number 5, look for and acknowledge the good. It's so easy to get caught up in seeing all the bad, all the negative. It's so easy. If you guys hit a bump in the road with your in-laws, or you've had issues or miscommunication or disagreements, it's easy to now always find fault in them. Everything is bad. Their motives are always wrong. They always have something negative to say. You criticize everything. You guys, that's not 100% true at all. Sometimes you have to just sit back and look for the good. Everything isn't negative. Everything isn't bad. Yeah, you guys may have had some bumps in the road. Yeah, there may have been some disagreements or some miscommunication. But you guys can work through that. You can work through that. There is some good here. Look for the good. Purposefully, consciously look for the good. Because if not, all you will see is bad. It's just like marriage. You get into a marriage and you guys are trying to figure each other out. You grew up in different homes. You don't think the same way. You don't do the same things. You don't even like all the same things. But you have to figure it out. You have to look for what's good. What is it why did I marry my spouse? Why did I choose them? Why did I commit my life to them? What is it that I love about them? What is it that I like about them? And you have to focus on those things. It's the same way with your in-laws. If all you see is bad, all you will see is bad. But if you look for the good, I promise you will see the good there. And work with the good. You guys can work through that bad stuff, the negative things, the things that you may not like or may be uncomfortable. You guys can work through that stuff. 6, work with your spouse and not against your spouse. We talked about this earlier. You and your partner are a team. You guys should be on one accord. You guys should be in agreement. Work with your spouse and not against your spouse. 7, go to therapy or involve a mediator. Therapy or a mediator, Monique, that may be a little extreme. No, because a lot of times this is our first time dealing with this. This is all new to us. We are all treading through new waters and we have no idea what we're doing. Some things may be a little more extreme than others. Maybe there's been some hurt or abandonment or unforgiveness. It may be something more there that needs to be dealt with. Everything can always be worked through together. Sometimes people only see it their way. And that could be both parties. This could be the child and the child's spouse. This can be the parents. Each party may think nothing is wrong with the way that they think or the way that they want to do things. So to begin to try to come to some type of agreement and to have a healthy relationship with one another, sometimes it may require therapy or a mediator to help you guys. And there is nothing wrong with that. If you listen to Demo with Mo, you know that I am an advocate for therapy. There are some things that you just cannot work through on your own, and God has given us the resources to have when we need them. If you need to talk to a mediator, talk to a mediator. If you guys need to go to therapy to work through some issues, go to therapy and work through some issues. Would you rather just be mad at one another for years, holding on to things for years, missing out on things that you guys could enjoy with one another for years, them having a chance to be in their grandchildren's life and their grandchildren experiencing that relationship with them? Or would you prefer to just do the work and work through the hard things so that you guys can begin to have a healthy relationship? You choose. 8, maintain a united front. I don't care if the wife don't agree with the husband and the husband don't agree with the wife. You guys maintain a united front. If there's a disagreement, if you guys may not agree with something that happened, maybe one partner didn't see anything wrong with it. If your partner feels some type of way, or they open up to you about something that happened that they didn't like, that maybe rubbed them the wrong way, always maintain a united front. Now, when you guys get home, sit down and talk about it. Sit down and express how you really feel. If you didn't agree with it, or you didn't see anything wrong with it, or maybe your perspective is different, and you guys work through that together. But you always maintain a united front. 9, don't ignore the problem. If there's an issue there, and there can be many of issues, maybe you have in-laws that like to pop up at your house, and their motives are not wrong. Maybe that's something they did growing up, or how their family works. They don't mind family popping over, because everybody does their house differently. I have family. My grandmother don't mind me popping up at her house. But that's not the same for me. I don't like pop-ups. I don't like pop-ups from anybody. Not my mama, not my daddy, not anyone. I don't like pop-ups, because you don't know what I'm doing. I may not even be in a mood where I feel like being hospitable, even though I'm a very hospitable person. I'm just giving this to you as an example. But you guys, don't ignore the problem. If that's a problem for you, don't shrug it off and act like it's nothing. Talk about it. Be open and address the problem. It may not, more than likely, be a big of an issue as you thought it was. Let your in-laws know, okay, we don't like pop-ups. Give us at least an hour's notice or a day's notice, so we can kind of get the house in order, or we can have the kids settled, or this may be the baby's nap time. You don't know, but this is a conversation that you need to have. Don't ignore the problem. Address the problem, but do it in a very respectful way. Just because there's an issue don't mean there has to be conflict. You guys can sit down, discuss the issue. You and your partner talk about whatever the problem or the issue is, and see how you guys want to go to your parents and discuss it, because it may be the wife's parents, or it could be the husband's parents, but you guys be on one accord, but address the issue. Don't ignore the problem. We did that for years in our marriage. We would ignore the problems, and then we'll come home and talk to each other about it, be mad about it, or fuss about it, or argue about it, and feel some type of way. And y'all, it's so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy, and it affects your marriage. Whenever there's issues with in-laws that have not been addressed or dealt with, or there hasn't been boundaries put in place, or whatever it is, it affects your marriage, you guys. Do not sacrifice your marriage to please your parents. Don't sacrifice your marriage to please your siblings. Don't sacrifice your marriage to please your grandparents. No, you guys have to be on one accord. You have to be in agreement. You guys are partners. You are a team, and your marriage is your first priority before any other relationship in your life, except for your relationship with God. And treat it as such. Respect one another. Honor one another. Have the conversations. Don't ignore the problems. Talk about the problem and figure out a healthy dynamic for your family and your extended family. 10, last point. If you have children, don't you ever don't ever talk negative about your in-laws in front of them. I would never. I don't care what has been said, what has been done, how they rubbed me the wrong way. don't ever talk negative about your in-laws in front of your children, because you don't want to set that dynamic for them. You don't want them to look at their in-laws some type of way, because that's not their experience. Unless you're dealing with an unhealthy in-law, that's a different conversation. Someone that may cause harm or danger or has an addiction or abusive history, that's not what I'm talking about. In that case, that is something completely different. But I'm just saying, on the surface, issues that you may have experienced where you've gotten offended or rubbed the wrong way, or you didn't like something that was said, or it felt like they were trying to control you or cross your boundaries. In that case, don't ever talk negative about your in-laws in front of your children, because that grandparent-grandchild relationship is a different ball game. Like I told you guys, I have a great relationship with my grandparents. I couldn't imagine my parents sitting up talking about my grandparents, and that would change the way I looked at them. That would change my relationship and the love that I had for them, because I don't see them in that light. I don't see those negative things that you as parents may see. So don't ever, ever try your best not to ever talk negative, criticize, talk down. Don't ever do that in front of your children. All right, guys, I hope what has been discussed has helped you on today. Like I said earlier, I know this could be a sensitive area for some, and I completely empathize with you. I really hope that you guys are able to work through and figure out a healthy dynamic for your family, and how you can maneuver through sometimes the muddy water of having in-law relationships. You guys can do it. We can do all things through Christ. All things. So I encourage you, do the work. It takes some work, but do the work. Be on one accord with your spouse. You guys are teammates. You are partners. We are to leave and cleave. We leave our parents' home and we cleave to our spouse, so that the two can become one. You guys now have your own nuclear family. You can make your own traditions, to do things your own ways, set healthy boundaries, and you guys can figure this thing out. You can make it work. As we get ready to close out, I want to pray for you guys who may be struggling in this area, because I personally know, and it's heavy on my heart, y'all. You guys are heavy on my heart. You guys who may be dealing with this, because this is a hard issue. It is hard. And I just want to lift you up in prayer on today. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this beautiful day that you have made and that you have allowed us to see and be a part of it. Lord, I know that this issue on in-law relationships is hard for a lot of people. I know this is an issue that a lot of people struggle with in their relationships. There are some people who don't have relationships with their in-laws. There are some people where they have an unhealthy relationship. There are some people who have great relationships with their in-laws. But Lord, I lift them all up to you. The hurt, the pain, the loneliness, all of the feelings that you can feel in this situation, Lord, I ask that you comfort them, that you let them know that you are there, and Lord, help them to be accountable for their part in this dynamic. Help them to take responsibility on what they can do better, whether that's communication, that's forgiveness, that's letting some things go. Help them to do their part and begin to see you move in that area. Lord, I ask that you restore broken relationships between in-laws. I pray that you fix and restore marriages where this dynamic has affected their marriage in a negative way. Lord, I just ask that you restore the way only that you restore only the way that you can. I have seen it with my own eyes. I have experienced it in my own marriage. And Lord, I thank you. I thank you for what you've done in my life. I thank you for what you're going to do in the people who are listening to this lives as well. In your son, Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. All right, guys. As always, I love you, but God loves you more. Bye. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Follow me on Facebook at Demo with Mo. If you have any questions you would like answered here live on my podcast, email them to me at demowithmo@gmail.com. That's DEMOWITHMO@gmail.com.